Hi guys, it's Amber from Amber Reads Books, and I'm here today to bring you my November Reads video. This is the video where I wrap up everything that I read in the month of November. I made a November TBR, and I have to say, I did not read them all. I did not read all the books. I couldn't. I don't know why I do this to myself. I always seem to make unrealistic TBRs, and then when it comes to the end of the month, I'm like, man, I did not get through as many books as I guess I thought I was going to. But I'm really happy with the number of books that I got through this month. And I think what I'm going to do is show you guys the books I didn't end up getting through. And those are just going to go either back on my shelf or back to the library, because I would like to have a clean slate going into 2018, and I don't want to have books already sitting on my TBR shelf at home that I feel like I am obligated to read. So that is what I'm going to do. But I have read 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 books in the month of November, and let's get into them. As always, I'm going to start with my lowest ranked books and work my way up to my highest, though I have 2 books that I DNF'd, and I didn't really, I ranked them for my own personal reasons, but I don't feel like sharing my rating for them. But I did DNF them, and the first of those was Turtles All the Way Down by John Green. And I feel really sad that I DNF'd this book because I was so looking forward to reading it. It was so anticipated by me. I pre-ordered it. I even ordered a signed copy, and I just wanted to love it, and I didn't. I had a couple of issues. One was, as always, I know John Green writes these characters that kind of speak in a way that seems unrealistic for teenagers. But for some reason in this book, it just really rubbed me the wrong way. I really pictured him speaking as these characters were speaking. Like, I could hear his voice in my head because I watch his YouTube channel, and it just seemed more like how he would think and how he talks, which is not the norm for a lot of teenagers and a lot of even adults. So it didn't really work for me. It kept taking me out of the story. That was the first thing. The second thing was the plot and the story itself and the characters. I just was not really connected to them. I didn't really enjoy the plot. I didn't feel like it moved along very well. Though I did feel like this book was more supposed to be about anxiety and OCD than it was supposed to be about what was actually happening sort of in the background of the story. But I didn't enjoy the plot enough to keep wanting to read, because my biggest problem with the book was I found it very triggering for me. I'm someone that does struggle with anxiety and OCD, and listening to the character talk and how she was going through these thought spirals and all this other stuff, it just really triggered me, and I could not read it at this point in time. I've watched a couple of reviews since then, and I just don't think it's something that I will ever pick back up, which really disappoints me. But you win some, you lose some, and this one was just a loss for me. The next book was an audiobook that I listened to. I DNF'd that, and that is You Are a Badass, How to Stop Doubting Your Greatness and Start Living an Awesome Life by Jen Sincero. I got this book just to kind of see what it was going to be about. Hopefully it was going to be encouraging and maybe inspiring me to go about stuff a little differently. And I got probably about 40% of the way into the book, and I just was not enjoying it. Every time I was like, oh, I should probably put it on while I'm in the car, I was like, I don't really want to. So I ended up just DNFing it. I'm sure for someone it would be a really great tool, but for me, it just was not anything that I hadn't heard before. The next book I picked up this month was Little Deaths by Emma Flint. This was for the Dying to Read book club on Goodreads, hosted by April from Getting Hugga With It. I'll leave all the links down below. This is the story of a woman who has been raising her children alone for the last little while. She has recently been separated from her husband, and her children end up going missing. The police start to investigate her. They see her perfectly made up. She's wearing kind of provocative clothing. There's liquor bottles that have been left all over the apartment. And they just kind of jump to these conclusions about what might have happened to these children. And there's a reporter who's kind of following the story. It was interesting. The premise was really interesting. I thought the first half of the book was pretty good. The second half of the book, though, really let me down. I just was not feeling it. So I ended up rating this 3 stars. I will say that I enjoyed the writing, so I think I would definitely pick up another book by her. This book just didn't work that well for me. The first sentence in this book is, On the rare nights that she sleeps, she is back in the skin of the woman from before. The next two books I'd like to talk about were both celebrity memoirs that I listened to as audiobooks. The first one was Scrappy Little Nobody by Anna Kendrick, and the other one was actually one that I kind of forgot to include in my October wrap-up, and that was Talking as Fast as I Can, From Gilmore Girls to Gilmore Girls and Everything in Between by Lauren Graham. Both of these books are enjoyable. I liked some of the stories, some of the chapters individually. I feel like they're more like short stories to me, and some chapters I really love, and some chapters I just don't like at all. So they both averaged out to a 3.5 rating for me. I think the parts of both books that I really liked were the sections where they talked more about their careers and about what went on behind the scenes, because that's how I see them and relate to them, is through their work. So those were the sections that I found the most interesting. Beyond that though, a lot of the book I probably could have just not even read. I really didn't care about some of the things that they were talking about. But both of them narrated it themselves. I think Anna Kendrick was funny and quirky, but she did curse a lot, which I thought was a little off-putting for me, because especially with audiobooks, I like to listen to them sometimes when the kids are around, and I just couldn't really listen to it while they were around. So that kind of was something that I did not enjoy about hers. Lauren Graham's, however, was really fun, and she talked just as fast as on Gilmore Girls, especially probably because I had it at like 2 times the speed. It was even faster. It was so hard to listen to. My kids were like, "Mom, what is she saying?" And I'm like, "Never mind." And I just listened to it while I drove back and forth to work and like to the grocery store and stuff. So I enjoyed both of them, but I really appreciated the parts about their careers way more than the other parts. The next book that I read this month was another one that I listened to on audiobook, and that is The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman. I had been wanting to read this book for a while, and finally my hold came through. I love listening to Neil Gaiman narrate books. His voice is just magic. It is so soothing and wonderful to listen to. So I was really excited to be able to finally dive into the story. I enjoyed it. This is a story about a boy named Bod. His parents are murdered in the beginning of the book, and he has been left in this graveyard and is being brought up by ghosts. Such a cool premise. The only thing I will say about this book, what kept it from being a 4 or 4.5 star read, was that it kind of meandered in places. It just took a lot of time getting to the point, and I would find myself kind of wandering off in my own mind while listening to it. However, I still feel like as a whole, it was a really great story, and I gave it 3.5 stars. I don't have the first line because it was an audiobook. The next book I read this month was one that I actually borrowed from a coworker. He recommended that I read it, and that is Jonathan Livingston, Seagull by Richard Bach. This is the story of a seagull who wants to be fast and wants to fly fast and wants to do all these things that seagulls aren't supposed to do, and he's told that over and over again. And it's one of those stories where when you read it, depending on which stage you are in your life, you're going to get something else out of it. I really ended up enjoying it, and I gave this book 4 stars. It's definitely one that I would go back and reread again in like another 10 years and see what else I could glean from it. And it's not a very big book. It does not take very much time to read at all. I read it in about, 45 minutes or so. So it's definitely one to check out if you're looking for something quick to read, something that you think you might want to read to get something out of it to relate to your own life. It's a very interesting little book, I have to say. Anyway, I don't have the first line because I had to give it back. The next book I picked up was Night Road by Kristen Hanna. I picked this up for Lisa's Buddy Reads group hosted by Lisa from Books and Smiles. I will leave the links down below. I was excited to pick this up because I had read The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna, and I thought that was a fantastic book. I didn't know if I'd still like her writing in a different setting, and I actually ended up really enjoying this. I gave this 4 stars. This is about Jude, who is a helicopter parent. She is trying to control and protect her teenagers from everything, and she ends up not being able to protect them from everything, and just kind of how they deal with the consequences of that. I found it so interesting and compelling. The first half was probably better than the second half for me though. Even though the second half was still great, the first half really drew me in, and I was very emotional while reading certain parts of this. I cried quite a bit, which I was not expecting, but I feel like this is a very important read, especially if you are the parents of teenagers, because you cannot control everything that happens to them, and it's kind of a lesson for parents that you can't control it, so you got to find a way to deal with the anxiety of it. But yeah, it's definitely a great read. The first line in this book is, "She stands at the hairpin turn on Night Road." I have another 4-star read for this month, and that was Missborne by Brandon Sanderson. Yes, I finally read this and finished it. This book took me like 12 days to finish, which is not like me, and it no testament to the book, because I just was not in the right headspace or something to be reading it. But finally, when I, pushed myself to really get into the story, I flew through the rest of it. I really, really enjoyed this book. I cannot wait to pick up the second one. For this being my first Brandon Sanderson, I can see why so many people love his writing. I really just fell into it and thought it was so easy to read and easy to get into. It wasn't too complicated for me. I got pretty much all of it, and I thought like the magic system in this was really, really unique. I don't think I'll be getting to the second book until probably January or February, but I'm really excited to get to it when I do. The first sentence in this book is, "Ash fell from the sky." And the last book that I read this month was my 5-star read, and that was our hashtag on the booktube shelves pick for the month of November, "Saving Simon, How a Rescue Donkey Taught Me the Meaning of Compassion" by John Katz. Obviously, this book is about what it sounds like. It is about Simon, who is basically left for dead, and he ends up getting rescued and brought to John's farm. And John learned so much about compassion while rehabilitating him. I got so much out of this book. First of all, I cried a ton. I did not think I would cry so much during this read, but I was crying like right and left. I just felt so bad for the animals, and just the way John describes things and how he talks about Simon and how strong Simon ended up becoming was just really heart-touching, and I just could not control it. I had tissues ready while I was reading it. But it's so much more than just a rescue story. First of all, I learned a ton about donkeys. I did not know anything about them. It's not an animal that I would just automatically say, hey, let me go out of my way and learn about donkeys. But reading this taught me so much. Like, one random example, when a donkey says hello to other donkeys, it's not uncommon for those donkeys to kick each other in the head. This poor donkey was kicked in the head quite a bit from 2 other donkeys that John had already owned. And I was like horrified, but like amazed kind of at the same time while reading that. And John also goes ahead and tells us about other animals that he's rescued. And those stories were just as heart-touching as this one was. John talks a lot about compassion, and it's something that I'd like to try to incorporate more into my life. I am a pretty compassionate person, but he's talking about the kind of compassion that you have towards people or situations that you normally wouldn't be compassionate about. Like, should he have compassion towards the farmer who pretty much left Simon to die? I don't think I'm at that point where I could be very compassionate towards that farmer. I just don't have that in me right now, but it is definitely an avenue of emotion that I'd like to explore sometime in the next year or so, and just try to kind of keep bringing that to the forefront and see how that would change. It's like with any other emotion, like gratitude too, just kind of being more conscious about it. But yeah, this book was wonderful. There were so many quotable moments in this book that were even beyond just an animal rescue book. I have highlighted some of them, and I definitely plan on doing a reread of this at some point, because I would love to go back through and make sure that I got them all. But if you guys are in the mood for a nonfiction account, this is just wonderful, and I highly recommend it. Also, John Katz has a YouTube channel where you can actually go and check out and see Simon and other animals that he owns. He has written many books, and I definitely plan on checking out another book of his very, very soon. The first line in this book is, "It was Mackenzie Barrett, the animal control officer's daughter, who named him Simon." So those were all the books that I read in the month of November. I have a huge stack of books that I had on my November TBR that I did not get to. So let me show you those now. I did not get to any of these books. And I've decided that going into 2018, I do not want any books hanging over my head on my TBR shelf. So these are all gonna go back on my regular shelf, and I will read them during 2018 when I can get to them. The only one that's not going back on my shelf is Since We Fell, because that is a library book, so that's going back to the library. I'm currently reading Tower Lord by Anthony Ryan. This is book 2 in a series. I'm really enjoying it, so I'm hoping to get this read in the next couple of days so I can go ahead and get into my Christmas TBR for December. Anyway, what have you guys read this month? Did you read anything that you loved, anything that you hated? As always, let me know down in those comments below, and I hope you have a great month and happy reading.